On this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
This episode of Life Science Success is brought to you by 5280 Life Sciences Consulting. If you need help setting your strategy, meeting your operational goals, or are selecting and implementing critical technology in your business, we should talk. Visit 5280lifescience.com to schedule a meeting and find out more.
Today on the podcast, I'd like to welcome Neil Sankar. Welcome, Neil.
Hi, Donan. Good to connect.
Can you tell the listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. So I'm a clinician by training and got my oncology training in National Cancer Institute. And currently, for the last almost 20 years or so, I am working on the drug development within the pharmaceutical biotech. So in a layman's term, it's like the medical expert working for the pharmaceutical company when they are coming out with their new drugs. It could be biologics, small molecules, antibody-drug conjugates, any of those drugs which are now coming out for the treatment of advanced tumors.
So most of your clients, are they larger pharma companies? Are they smaller? Is there a broad range or?
There is. So I work with from big size pharma to small biotechs. Yeah, the whole range.
The drug life cycle could take anywhere from 10 to 15 years in a lot of cases. So what stage are you normally involved overall, from the early stage, mid stage, and late stage, or is it primarily late stage and ready to go to market?
Yeah, very good question. So you are right. There is what is called as the preclinical stage, where they do identify the target, work in the lab, work with the biopsy tissues, tumor tissues, and so forth in the lab. Then my role comes when the drug is ready to be tested in the clinic. So what I mean by that is when it's going to be tested in human beings the very first time. So when it is transitioning from the lab to the clinic, that's when I take it over and I be part of the project all the way up until the drug gets approved. So once the drug gets approved, there is a different sector of people like medical affairs, commercial, they will be taking it over at that stage. So I am primarily in the clinical domain.
Yeah, so I would imagine that's phase 1 through phase 3 is where you're primarily involved.
Exactly.
You drop out, the client takes it into phase 4 and forward. Interesting. Yeah, and what about, do you work on always new drugs, or do you work on biosimilars and generics, or no?
Very good question. I've been offered a position to work in biosimilar generics, but no, I don't. My interest is working in the new therapeutics, new molecular entities off the shelf rather than working in biosimilars or generics. I don't work in that.
Okay. And then I would imagine that a lot of these, especially given where you're getting engaged, right? So the phase 1 portion is very clinical trial intensive. And so your interactivity then is, do you do a lot of designing of the clinical trials and things like that?
Yes. So depending on the project and the responsibility I have on that specific project, in some projects, I am the lead clinician, I am the all-in-all, then I have to do the clinical strategy, clinical trial design, work with the KOL, put together a clinical development plan, and then move forward. In certain pharma or certain biotech, I may be doing just the medical monitoring aspect of it, which is monitoring how the trial is going and just staying on top of the safety of the patients and working with the clinicians to get who are enrolling the patients, work with them if they have any questions and getting the patient, getting the doses and so forth. And in some other projects, it would be the role of all of the above. So it depends on the state of the project, the type of the client, and also the project needs. Certain projects, for example, in phase 3, you may not have to do a lot of clinical strategy. This trial is already a mature trial and it keeps going. So I'm just doing the medical monitoring and medical oversight of the whole clinical trial moving forward.
And is it primarily you, or do you normally have a team that you help to form to do a lot of this work as well? Because I know, at least for the organizations I've been a part of, they have everything from clinical trial managers. You have people who are day to day talking to maybe CROs about their interactivity. I'm just curious, how many people are typically on your team whenever you're working with companies?
Yeah, again, it's a good question. Again, it would depend on the size of the company, right? And the bandwidth they have. Some companies, and also the type of the project and the arrangement they have with the contract research organization, right? Sometimes companies totally outsource everything to CRO, then it's going to be minimal. Some projects, companies may say, let's keep the medical monitoring, medical oversight, biostats, and clinical operations inside our company. Rest of everything else is outsourced, then it will be like that. So depending on the state of the project and the bandwidth and the funds availability of the company, how they can. And also, it may also depend on the size of the project. So for example, if it's a global trial, then obviously you may have a big CRO supporting the trial. You may have local medical experts supporting those regions. And then in those scenarios, mostly I will act as the global medical lead, where the things come up to me when the local medical experts cannot resolve, or if they want to escalate to my level to get a second opinion, if I may say. So that's how. So there is a lot of factors which that would depend on.
And do you primarily focus on drugs in the cancer space and things like that, or are there other areas that you focus on as well?
No, primarily oncology. I would say, yeah, last few years have been totally cancer, but every type of cancer, solid tumors like breast, ovary, lung, then sarcomas, tissues, connective tissue cancers, bone cancers, and then brain CNS cancers like glioblastoma, and then also blood or heme malignancies like leukemias, lymphomas, and so forth.
What led you to this area of work? What made you want to get into oncology in the first place?
So even me going into medicine I'm originally from India because I'm very good in science. I'm a little weak in maths. So back home, when you're strong in science, you take a path to go into medicine. So that's how I went into that. The clinical research and oncology stepped into me when I was offered an interesting role in National Cancer Institute, where some of these things opened up for me, and I got to work with some big leaders in oncology at that time. This is in the early 2000s. And that kind of opened up the door for me to pursue drug development. And I saw there is something which is called as clinical research, clinical drug development. So the science part, and this is, you get to work with new therapies and new drugs, life-saving drugs, which is even before it comes to the market, you play a major role in getting that. So it's very motivating enough to be part of it.
It's for sure a great area of science as well as medicine for people to study. And it's, as I look at where we are today with personalized medicines, you have personalized therapies, you have personalized diagnostic tests. It seems like a very exciting place to be as well. Everything from some of the new therapies that are coming out for the tumors themselves, but also just a very personalized nature that some of the treatments can be applied. It seems like it's got to be one of the most exciting areas to be a scientist.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The new genomic sequencing is coming now. Everything is going to be targeted therapies, identifying patients who would benefit from a specific therapy versus just whatever is available. So a lot of things are now getting personalized, and even the treatment going forward is getting personalized depending on if it's a targeted therapy specific to a specific mutation, then obviously you have targeted therapies available. Patients get access to that through clinical trials, or if they are approved, they get it standard of care. Yeah, it's a big shift now. Everything is getting personalized now as much as we can.
Yeah. And the other question I have, are you doing work in COVID as well currently?
Yes, to a very, yes, I've been part of a nonprofit organization. It's called as Caring, which I am part of the management, and they have clinicians from MD Anderson to other institutions, and we are doing a lot of our work is around the data mining of the available data in the domain, pooling the data and see what is out there. So we are doing a data mining effort, and we are also working with a couple of organizations in India, scientific driven science organizations, getting support from them so this is again more of data mining, data analytical support because we have so much of things happening, a lot of clinical trials happening, and getting all that data and putting it into one piece or putting it together and try to derive some knowledge out of it and see where it's going and who is benefiting versus who is not, and things like that. So that's the primary COVID project.
And then I guess the other question related to COVID is, are you seeing it impact clinical studies as well? Is COVID impact getting patients in to be a part of clinical studies currently?
Oh, no, that's a very interesting question. So when COVID started, I would say maybe in June, July, big institutions, they were putting a plan in place, kind of emergency procedures in place. So patient enrollment dropped a little bit, but then obviously people got together, institutions got their act together and see how to manage it. And obviously patients with cancer, you got to treat them. You can't just say, you know what, geez, you come back after a month, we'll treat you. These are life and death situations for patients. But it was a transient dip, but then it just fizzled out. When everybody got their act together, it became much smoother.
Think back to last April, almost 1 year now from the time that we're recording this. And I just think about the fact that there were a lot of people just not understanding sort of the depth and breadth of what COVID was and what it was going to impact. And I know a lot of the clients even that I speak with, they say that it interrupted briefly their clinical trials, but a lot of them did get things back underway. I just didn't know if you're in your area, if you'd seen anything different.
Yeah, I agree. That's exactly what I have seen too.
Yeah,
I concur with that.
So in terms of the greatest challenges that you help your clients overcome, what are some of the greatest challenges that you typically face in your line of work, and how do you help them with those things?
So the greatest challenges is always, going to be the clinical strategy, because it's constantly changing, right? There are new drugs coming out to the market, and kind of putting together a clinical strategy and putting together a plan in place and see how we can seamlessly move forward and also addresses any potential issues coming in the way. If you have to change the plan and go to a different direction, for example, looking at going towards a single agent treatment versus combination therapy with something approved, how to make use of that, what is the right patient population. So that's always the constant challenge. And obviously getting all this to put together and have the enrollment going for the clinical trials, because once that's all put in place, then you have to make sure the patient enrollment happens in a very timely manner, because each day lost is a big loss for the company. It has to be very intense. A lot of hand-holding there to be done, depending on where the project is and what the project is.
And how do you best stay up to date in terms of what's coming? Is it through watching what clinical trials are going on, or are there other ways that you really keep the pulse in terms of what's going on in the industry and what might come and maybe disrupt the next cancer drug development?
So good question. So again, I subscribe to a lot of news channels, primarily in oncology, and I get email feelers from that. And then obviously conferences, the biggest thing. I attend at least 4 to 6 conferences a year, minimum of 4. So that would include ASCO, AACR. I used to attend ASH every year, but not anymore since I'm not doing any blood cancer projects. And then CTOS for sarcomas, connective tissue tumors, then know for neuro-oncology. So I go to conferences where I attend keynotes, I attend abstracts, look at posters, because that's where you see what's all coming down the pipeline. And then, of course, AACR, where you have the preclinical piece of the cancer research coming into play. So that's another big conference I need to go. So it's still always a catching up game. You can't always be on top of it. It's an ever-changing scenario, but you try to be knowledgeable as much as you can by subscribing to these news channels, emails, and also attending these conferences.
Okay. In terms of the things outside of this specific area and keeping your pulse in terms of what's happening, what are your hobbies and interests outside of being an oncologist?
No, I like to spend time with friends. Family is one thing, very less downtime I have. I like travel. I used to play tennis when I was younger, not anymore. I used to play tennis, and I don't know if you have heard about shuttle badminton. It's very common in India. They call it shuttlecock. I used to play that game. Outdoor activities, I used to go hiking, not anymore, but I used to be very active in that. So that's how I spend time.
A lot of those things are tough currently, but hopefully they continue to become more and more regular again now that travel should become more regular and other things as we get the vaccine and more people being vaccinated. Hopefully that frees things up overall.
I like reading too. I forgot to tell you that I love reading, a lot. I read quite a bit. Not stories, the scientific articles, papers, abstracts, all those, yeah.
Seems to be where I spend most of my time, is constantly, chasing after things that are happening in the industry, just trying to stay up to date. But also it's very interesting to me. I love our line of work and I can't get enough of it, it seems some days. So for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. That's how you can keep track of what's happening around you, especially in the scientific literature.
In terms of influences on your life, if you could have a conversation with any leader about challenges that you've faced, who would you want to talk to and who would you want to spend time with in terms of things that you've faced, or who are the more influential leaders that you've had in your past?
One of the people I would like to talk to is, interestingly, Elon Musk, because the company, if you look at the growth of Tesla, where it versus where it is now, so he did something for sure. Even though if you think about, they had a lot of hiccups, they had issues with the technology, a lot of fires and all those things with the vehicles they made. He's here now. So he's one of them I would like to talk to and get some insight. Absolutely.
Yeah, I find his personality to be interesting. His way of carrying on a conversation is hard for me to follow, but I think it must primarily be because of his intellect. You see him pick up any sort of subject and become somewhat of an expert in it. And you look at the fact that he has a solar company, a car company, and a space rocket company, and it's just you can't think of things that could be somewhat different or as different as they could possibly be. So for sure, that would be an interesting conversation.
Absolutely. I think you made a valid point. While you were talking, the other guy also who inspires me, these are the two guys I think, is Amazon. When I came into the US, if you look at how Amazon was, it's a book depot, right? Repository of books. Now from electronics, hardware to being the biggest platform for buying items. They are into everything you think of. They are into pharmacy, you name it. They are also into space. They have their own ecosystem built in. They have their own Amazon ecosystem built in. Jeff Bezos would be another guy. These are the two guys I would be very interested in speaking to.
And I guess, again, related to our sort of area of the world, right? Anybody running biostatistics, it seems like, or collecting massive amounts of data, if you're not putting your data on AWS, you're certainly putting it somewhere in one of these large sort of data farms as well. And there are only three that come to mind to me. I know that there are probably more names to people that are in that area of the industry, but whenever I think about it, Amazon for sure is one of the largest. I like to ask everybody 3 questions. What inspires you?
Obviously, being where the field I am in, one of the things is solving big, meaningful problems, which for me would be very apt to finding cures for some of the very advanced cancers. That's keeping me awake and keeping me motivated. So that's would be the primary one, I would say.
Okay. What concerns you?
Keep myself motivated, keeping the motivation on, and also burning out. I work long hours, just so you know, very long. And since 2014, I don't think I have technically taken a vacation. Even if I travel, I still work. It's not technically a vacation where I don't touch my laptop or PDA or my iPhone and don't respond to emails or answer calls. So burning out is a serious concern I have. These would be the two, keeping the motivation and burning out would be the ones which would concern me.
What excites you?
Excites, it's a good question. I would say it would be like the ability to positively influence people. When I speak to people, they say you have got to work on some of these very innovative. I do also mentoring kids who are in college and are like Rice Business University competition, things like that when I have time. So having an ability to positively influence would be one, I would say, would be the primary one, which kind of excites me.
Neil Sankar, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast today. I greatly appreciate you spending time with me.
Oh, thanks for taking the time to talk to me. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it, and last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.